Hi there, boys and girls. We are ready. I've got my three-corner hat on, and we are talking about, what do you remember who we're talking about? Ludwig, right? And he's a, what is he? Is he a sculptor? Is he a painter? Is he a soldier? Oh, he had been a soldier, but he's not a soldier now. Yeah, his wife says he's too old to be a soldier, and that may be true. But he goes to see General Washington, nonetheless, and General Washington says, I got a job for you. And that job has to do with Ludwig's being a baker. And he bakes bread, gingerbread for the army. He made it in Philadelphia for the people in Philadelphia. They would buy it, and then he would give small pieces of gingerbread cookies to the children who didn't have money to buy it. But he's baking a lot of loaves of bread because he's got an army to bake for. Now, it's not a big army. General Washington just starts out, and he only has about 3,000 soldiers in his army as he moves out. But he's going out to help the people, and he has to travel, and Ludwig has to travel with him. They go from Philadelphia all the way up to Boston. Now, have any of you been in Philadelphia? I lived in Philadelphia for a number of years on the outside, and also drove school bus in Philadelphia for children to get to school. So he has to be in Philadelphia because that's where he landed when he came from. Remember the country he came from? Germany. Yeah, Germany. And that's going to play in our story today. We're going to talk about some other people that came from Germany. Anyway, they have to go up to Boston because that's where there's a problem happening. That's a long ways up. I've been to Boston. That's way up in Massachusetts and New England. It's a long way up there, and there's some fighting going on up there. Long started before he even got there, but he got there and he helped them with the soldiers that he brought, and the enemy had happened to be the British from England. They left the city, and now he has to go to someplace else, and that's where we're picking up the story today, because what happened is the King George III is talking to his helpers, and he's saying, people are saying that the colonists can defeat our redcoats. And they're saying, ha, 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 that can't happen. And he says, well, what if they could? And then they think, oh, what are we going to do? And so the king says, it's down in the small print, we got to get some other soldiers. We're running out of English soldiers. And so he contacts some other countries to get soldiers. And we're going to find out where one of those countries is in just a moment. Because what happens is they turn this page. They're standing in New York. I've been to New York too many times. I've driven around New York and been out on Long Island, and that's where he was out, General George Washington was out on Long Island, and he was watching the ships coming in. Here's all those ships coming in, and George Washington is kind of, what's going to happen with all those ships? And there's probably soldiers on those ships, and indeed there were soldiers. And the ships sailed into sight, and the whole harbor looked like a forest with the tall sails. Hundreds of ships in that harbor. And they come up to Staten Island. Now, I've never been on Staten Island. But Staten Island didn't have many people. Because there were only a couple thousand people living in New York at this time. Manhattan, where George Washington had landed, was mostly farmland. And down by the shore, there were docks and stuff, but not. So General Howe puts all these soldiers coming in, and George Washington says, "I've never seen such an army." And this guy says, "Me neither." And this guy says, "Definitely not me. But who's this down here?" He says, "I've seen this army." Because this is Christopher Ludwig, the baker. And he's from Germany. And not only is he from Germany, he's from the province of Hesse. That's where he grew up. And he was a German soldier for many years. When he was 17, a long time ago, he joined the army. So he knew what Hessian soldiers were about. He's also been in the Navy, so he knew about the boats that that they were coming on. He said, I've seen those before. Oh my goodness. Thousands of them. Washington only has a few thousand soldiers to begin with. And King George has hired all these German-speaking soldiers. Now, he can't talk to them. They can't talk to him. But they have some of their commanders along. But you know who can talk to them? The baker. Because he's from Germany himself, and he can speak German. And he comes to General Washington, and he says to him, I've got a plan. These soldiers are from my homeland. I know them. I don't know them personally, but I know them because that was many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, maybe more than that he was a soldier in the Hessian army. But he said, I'm going to go talk to them. Maybe they'll come over and join our side. Oh, Washington says, but if you're caught, you'll be treated as a spy and you'll be killed. They'll hang you. And so he says, I better not get caught. I guess you better not. So anyway, he gets in a rowboat from Brooklyn and Long Island, and he starts to row across the bay. And he's thinking of all the things that he's going to tell these Hessian soldiers. And he's thinking of it in German. We've got the words that he heard here a while back: revolution, independence, liberty. I can't pronounce those words in German. But he's thinking in German because that's how he's got to talk to the people. And it's a dark night. He's going in at midnight from Long Island, rowing by himself across. And you know what happened? Next week we'll find out what happened on that trip across. Now, today, there's another word in Yankee Doodle. Remember, we got Yankee Doodle and Doodle. We did Doodle, the word Doodle. That means kind of being awkward or clumsy, okay, or doodling and not really writing in a good way. That's doodling. But then they said macaroni. Now, see, I got the feather in my cap. But I thought if one feather's good, two feathers better. And so I got two feathers. And it's macaroni and cheese. It's all of it together. And so I've got that. But I thought of another thing. See, the person who covered for me last week at church, she had a special hat. And I said, I'm going to get that special hat that she has so that I look fancy. And I got one. I went to the bake shop on Juniata Parkway. And I got this hat from the German baker shop on Juniata, right next to the river. It's a good hat. I had to do some adjustments on it because the head that it was for was smaller than my head. But doesn't it look good? I look fantastic. Okay? So I'm going to finish out with my baker's hat that I got at Juniata Parkway Baker Shop. And anyway, we had macaroni. And I've got my fancy outfit on. Look, fancy shirt and my baker's hat so that I am true macaroni. Okay? And then it goes on to say, mind the music and the steps, and with the girls be handy. Yankee Doodle went to town, riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Yankee Doodle, keep it up. Yankee Doodle, dandy. A dandy is a guy who's a sharp dresser, just like me. And that's what I am, a sharp dresser with my baker's cap and my feathers and even a red handkerchief. That is really fantastic. Now, that's not all, because I have here one of the fanciest parts of the outfit you could ever want to have. I have a cape, and I'm going to put it on so you can think that I am a troop. Do you see how my cape matches my baker's hat? Colorful. I am in style. I am really in style. I'm a Jim Dandy. And not only is this a cape, but when I need it to be, it's also an apron. And I can work like that. Isn't that amazing? I am amazing. But I have one other word too. That's on there. Mind the music and steps, and with the ladies be handy. But then it says, Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a, do you remember what it said? A pony. Yeah. Have you ever ridden on a pony? They're a small horse-like thing, But a horse, you can ride on a horse, and there you have somewhat of a smooth gait. I rode on ponies a couple of times just to do some clowning when I worked at a youth ranch. And there's a walking, horses walk, and that's not too bad. And gallop, they can gallop pretty smooth. And they also lope, or trot, it's called sometimes. But Western riding, we call it a jog, or a canter is the faster way, or a trot. And on a pony, with their short little legs, it's bop, 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 bop. And your teeth almost fall out trying to ride a pony on a jog and stuff like that, because it's so rough. And see, they're saying, you don't even have a horse to ride, you have to ride on ponies. So it's another way of making fun of the American, the colonial soldiers. So, but I mentioned about Boston. When the British left Boston, the colonials came down off the hills where they had been setting up their fortresses, and they sang Yankee Doodle as they were going into town. And they had people playing their drums and playing their fifes to that tune as they marched into the city. That's the first time they used it as a conquering people and marched into the city. Now, next week, I'm going to tell you about Yankee. That's the last word in that chorus. We haven't talked about Yankee. How in the world, or what in the world does the word Yankee mean? So you want to be here next week when we talk about Yankee, okay? All right, we're going to sing the song, just that chorus, because that's all that we need to sing. But next week I'm going to introduce you to the next verse, which talks about going down to the camp. And a new word too, that's part of that. Okay, Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his hat and called it macaroni. Yankee Doodle, keep it up. Yankee Doodle, dandy. I lost it. Here it is. Mind the music, okay? They didn't know the fancy music. Yankee Doodle was a simple tune. They knew that. Mind the music and the step. They couldn't do the dance either. And Will the Girls Be Handy? Yeah, that was it. Well, we'll sing that next week too, and you'll know what Yankee's all about. And then we're also going to talk about hasty pudding, okay? And you probably never had hasty pudding, but maybe you have and didn't know you did. All right, we'll have a prayer, and then I'll see you next week. Father, thank you for this day. Thank you for the story of Christopher Ludwig and of how he helped in the American Revolution and why he helped in the American Revolution. We thank you for this story, for what it has to teach us about our heritage as a people and what our inheritance can be towards the future as well. In Jesus' name, amen. See you, boys and girls. Take care.